Welcome to this video, which is talking about pollution in the atmosphere. So if you're doing triple chemistry, this is C6.3.2. If you're doing combined science, then it's C6.2.2. So your previous knowledge that you need to know. So combustion is when a substance burns in oxygen. So we normally do this to harvest the heat energy. So if you've got a coal fire at home or if you've got a gas cooker, then you're burning it in oxygen to get the heat energy. Now, if you are doing triple chemistry, you also need to know about complete combustion and incomplete combustion. Now, because we've taught this out of order, you may not know this already, but you might have met it at key stage 3. So complete combustion is when there's an excess of oxygen. So there's plenty of oxygen there. And then when you get plenty of oxygen, what you get when you combust carbon is you get carbon dioxide. Incomplete combustion is when there's a limited supply of oxygen, so when there's not enough there. And when there's not enough oxygen to give you carbon dioxide, when you combust carbon, you get incomplete combustion, you get carbon monoxide. So there's only one oxygen for every carbon, as opposed to carbon dioxide, where there's 2 oxygens for every carbon. So before we start, you need to have a go at the quiz questions. They'll be coming up on the interactive version now. So before we get to the learning objectives, I want you to look at this picture. So the left-hand side of the picture was taken in 2020, and the right-hand side was taken in 2019. So they're the same place, and you can see they're very different. So I want you to have a think before we go into the next slide. Maybe pause the video and have a think about why there might be a difference. So hopefully you've identified that there's a difference because of air pollution. So that kind of fogginess on the right-hand side is something called smog, and that's caused by air pollution. So as we know, we've had this massive shutdown of huge parts of our society because of the coronavirus, and because of that, there's a lot of factories that aren't burning fuels and giving out pollution. The amount of traffic has reduced massively, and both of these things have resulted in less air pollution. And today's lesson, we're going to look at exactly what that air pollution is. So our learning objectives for today, you need to be able to state the major pollutants in the atmosphere. So you need to know their names and their formulae, and describe the problems that those major pollutants cause. So key definition first. We've talked about pollutants. You've probably heard the word before, but you need to know the exact definition. So a pollutant is a substance that's released into the environment that can cause harm to living things. So it doesn't definitely going to cause harm. And what we mean by the environment, so there's water pollutants, where they go into rivers, lakes, seas. But what we're concerned about today is atmospheric pollutants. So substances that are harmful that are released into the air. So our major pollutants, so I've done one of my very dodgy diagrams there. So I've labelled it a car because you can't really tell what it is. And cars are useful to talk about this because they give off all these major pollutants. So some of these pollutants are given off by factories and industry as well, but we're going to talk about the car because all of them come out of the car. So when we have our car, we know hopefully that our car runs on petrol or diesel, which is a fossil fuel, and that's a hydrocarbon, so it's got carbon and hydrogen there. So when you burn that fuel, you also get water vapor actually, which is not on here, and that is a greenhouse gas, so that does cause its own problems. So when you burn that hydrocarbon, the carbon in it combusts. And when that hydrocarbon combusts, so the hydrogen in it reacts to give water, and the carbon reacts to give either carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide, depending on how much oxygen there. So if there's lots of oxygen, you get carbon dioxide, which is bad because it's a greenhouse gas, and because we're producing more of it, that's going to cause global warming. We're not going to do that too much detail today because the next lesson that we do is going into more detail with that. If you don't have much oxygen there, then you get something called carbon monoxide. And that's toxic, so it causes drowsiness and breathing problems and ultimately deaths, which is why we don't want it. So hopefully in your house you've got one of those little carbon monoxide detectors, so if you've got any gas appliances. And also when you have incomplete combustion, you also get carbon particulates, so you get soot, for example. So particulate just means very, very tiny particles. And because they're very tiny, they get mobilized in the air and you can breathe them in. And that causes breathing problems, it can cause damage and lung problems such as bronchitis, and it can also cause heart disease. So as well as that, you can also have sulfur dioxide produced when we combust fossil fuels. So a lot of fossil fuels contain small amounts of sulfur, and those small amounts of sulfur, when it combusts, will react with the oxygen to give sulfur dioxide. Now, sulfur dioxide causes breathing problems. When we had the lesson on metals and non-metals and reaction with oxygen, we looked at sulfur dioxide. That was one of the examples we did. And remember, anybody who had asthma had to stand on the side or have their inhaler with them, because particularly if you've got asthma, it aggravates that and it can cause breathing problems. It also dissolves in water, and when it dissolves in water, it forms an acid. And because that's an acidic solution, that gives acid rain. And acid rain reacts with some statues and some buildings. So if it's got anything made out of limestone, which is calcium carbonate, will react with the acid, so it will get eroded. If you've got anything made of metal, it can react with that. And also living things like trees can be damaged by it. And also if lakes become too acidic because acid rain has gone into it, then the fish can end up dying. As well as acid rain being caused by sulfur dioxide, it's also caused by nitrogen oxides. So that doesn't come from the fuel itself, but there's very, very high engine temperatures in the car, and nitrogen and oxygen at room temperature will not react, but in those very high temperatures, the car engine, the nitrogen reacts with the oxygen to give nitrogen oxides. So that's either nitrogen monoxide or nitrogen dioxide. And we can lump them together because they do the same thing. They both dissolve in rainwater and give acidic solutions, which again cause the same problems as sulfur dioxide. If you want to here, there's an extension task. You could write word and symbol equations for the formation of the pollutants. And you could also have a quick research into the way that these pollutants could be reduced. So your first task, if you've not done the extension task, I want you to link the 5 major pollutants on the left-hand side. I want you to match them up with their effects on the right-hand side and write them into your notes. Right, task 2, I want you to answer the exam questions on this slide. So the first question is just multiple choice, and then the other is a 2-mark question. So remember, if it's a 2-mark question, you need to write 2 points. So it's asking for you to explain why it's important that atmospheric pollution is controlled. So you need to write 2 different points, 2 different reasons why it's important. Okay, the answers to this question are going to be on the next slide. So I want you to pause the slide there or pause the video there and have a go at that. And then when the next slide comes up, you can mark your answers. Okay, so there's your answer. So hopefully you've got carbon monoxide for question 1. And for question 2, explain why it's important that atmospheric pollution is controlled. Either maintain air quality, reduce or prevent harm to living organisms, control or reduce smog, or protect buildings and or metals. So each one of those is worth 1 mark. Right, the lesson is pretty much over now. All you need to do is answer the quiz questions so we can just check what you've learnt this lesson. If you're watching the interactive version, the questions will come up now. Okay, thank you for listening. See you next time.